She only wanted to save her mother, but her touch woke the city's most powerful man from a coma. Now, the maid who healed the CEO is running from a secret that could destroy them both. A secret crying in her arms, calling her mama. Love wasn't supposed to be dangerous, but in a world built on lies, the truth can kill. Ruolan stood by the window of her small rented room, the hospital's reflection trembling on the glass. Her fingers ached from scrubbing floors all day, yet her mind throbbed louder with a single thought: money. She'd begged for an advance, pleaded with her employer for her half-year salary. But when you were a maid with no last name worth remembering, pity was a currency no one could afford. The door burst open before she could blink. It was Sue Enki, her employer's daughter, dressed in silk and malice. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor like a countdown. "Ruolan," she said, voice sugar-coated poison. "I have a way to solve your little problem." Ruolan's spine stiffened. "I'll work double shifts. I just need time." Enki laughed, a brittle, cruel sound. "Work? You'll scrub floors until your mother's funeral if you keep working. I'm offering you something better." She slid a glossy photo across the table. A man, young, handsome, but deathly still, lay beneath a tangle of hospital wires. His name was whispered across every business magazine and scandal sheet. Mu Chengzhou, the comatose heir of the Mu Group, asleep for years after a mysterious poisoning. "They say he'll only wake," Enki said, eyes glittering, "if he sleeps with a girl bearing the surname Sue. The family's desperate. They've tried everyone. No luck." Ruolan's throat tightened. "You're joking." "I never joke about business. You do this, and I'll pay every debt you owe. 100,000 yuan. Enough to save your mother. Maybe even change your life." Her words fell like a curse. Ruolan stared at the photograph. His face was too perfect for a man lying on the edge of death. Chiseled, serene, untouched by the world's ugliness. He looked like someone carved to be adored, not pitted. Yet his stillness carried a strange gravity, as though something within him was listening, waiting. "I'm not selling myself," Ruolan whispered. Enki smirked. "Then sell your mother's life instead. She'll be dead by morning if you don't pay the hospital by dawn." For a moment, the room blurred. Her mother's frail voice echoed in her memory. "Ruolan, no matter what happens, keep your dignity." But dignity couldn't buy medicine. Pride couldn't keep her mother breathing. And so, sometime past midnight, beneath rain and neon, Sue Ruolan walked into the Mu family's private hospital, her heart pounding like thunder trapped in her ribs. The corridor was silent, too silent. Guards in black suits stood like shadows, their expressions unreadable as they opened the heavy door for her. Inside, the room felt colder than she imagined. Machines hummed softly around the bed where Mu Chengzhou lay. The scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint metallic tang of fear. Ruolan's fingers trembled as she approached him. He was real, skin pale as porcelain, lips colorless but soft. His chest rose and fell faintly beneath crisp white sheets. There was no trace of the man who once commanded empires, no hint of the power people whispered about, only stillness. She could turn back now, walk away, pretend she never agreed to this madness. But then her mother's weak voice filled her mind again, the way it had the last time she visited. "Don't worry about me, Ruolan. I'm happy as long as you're safe." She wasn't safe. Not from the world. Not from fate. Not from the choices forced upon her. With shaking hands, she reached for the man's wrist. His skin was cold. A chill crawled through her fingertips into her bones. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mr. Mu." The clock on the wall ticked once. Then the heart monitor beside the bed let out a sharp beep. Ruolan froze. Another beep, louder. The steady rhythm became erratic, then fierce. "What's happening?" A nurse gasped from the doorway. Lights flared red across the monitors. Doctors rushed in, heart rate spiking, BP rising. "He's reacting." The world erupted around her, but all Ruolan saw was his eyes, fluttering open. Dark, endless, burning eyes. He looked right at her. Not through her, not past her, at her. And in that heartbeat, the sterile hospital room felt alive. He inhaled sharply, as though drawing in air for the first time in years. Who are you? The words barely escaped his throat before the monitors blared again. Nurses surged forward, pulling her away. Get her out. Hands gripped her arms, dragging her toward the door, but she couldn't move her gaze from his. His fingers twitched, reaching, just slightly, as if to hold her there. Then she was gone. Outside the room, she stood trembling, breath clouding the air. Behind a closed door, she could still hear the chaos, the shouting, the rapid-fire orders, the disbelief. He had woken up. For years, every doctor had failed. Every cure had been a disappointment. Yet tonight, after one touch from a desperate maid, the city's sleeping prince had opened his eyes. Hours later, she walked home barefoot, shoes clutched in one hand, the night air sharp against her skin. The rain had stopped, but puddles shimmered under the pale moonlight. The envelope Enki had promised waited in her coat pocket, thick with money, stained with humiliation. She told herself she would forget his face, forget the way his heartbeat leapt beneath her fingers, forget how his eyes had locked on hers before she was dragged away. But deep inside, something had shifted. That pulse, that look, that impossible awakening. By the time she reached her door, dawn had begun to bleed across the sky. Her mother would live another day because of this bargain. That should have been enough. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she could still feel his hand beneath hers, the spark of warmth returning to cold flesh, the whisper of fate reshaping both their lives. Somewhere in the hospital, men in suits were already reporting to the Mu family patriarch. The young master woke, they said, after years of silence. And someone asked the inevitable question. Who was the woman? No one had an answer. But Mu Chengzhou, now lying awake under dawn's first light, did not need one. The scent that lingered in the room, soft, citrus, unforgettable, burned into his memory. Orange peel, the scent of the girl who had brought him back from the dead. And though she didn't know it yet, from that night onward, he would never stop searching for her. Welcome my beautiful family and friends to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, share, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now back to the story. The world returned to him in fragments. First the hum of a machine, then the faint rush of air, then her scent. It lingered in the sterile room, soft and bright amid the sharp bite of disinfectant. Orange peel, sweet, clean, alive. Mu Chengzhou's lashes flickered open, and for the first time in years, his eyes focused. The light above was blinding, slicing through the fog of dreams that had wrapped around him like chains. His throat felt scorched, his limbs foreign, his mind scattered across the years he had lost. A nurse gasped. He's awake. The room exploded with movement, doctors shouting, footsteps rushing, phones ringing. But Chengzhou's gaze stayed fixed on the ceiling as his pulse hammered inside his chest, wild and uneven. He didn't understand what had happened, only that something or someone had pulled him back from the dark. When he tried to speak, only one hoarse word came out. Who was here? No one answered him. But when the nurse changed his sheets, the faintest trace of citrus still clung to the pillow. He caught it again and again in the days that followed, whenever he dreamed, soft fingers trembling against his skin, a whisper of breath near his ear, and that scent, the one that had guided him out of the abyss. Weeks later, the Mu Mansion celebrated his miraculous recovery with champagne and flashing cameras. The headlines read, CEO heir awakens after 4 years in coma. A medical miracle. But behind the glass smiles and congratulations, questions burned like embers. Who had poisoned him? And why had he awoken now, after all this time? The doctors spoke of rare neural responses. The elders called it divine fate. But Chengzhou knew better. It wasn't medicine or miracles. It was her. Late at night, he would sit alone in his study, staring at the city lights beyond the window. The memory haunted him. Not a face, not a voice, just a fragrance that wrapped around his mind like silk. Orange peel. Sweet. Familiar. Who was she? A nurse? A dream? A hallucination born of his dying brain? His assistant found him one night, clutching a single bedsheet that had been stored away after the incident. Chengzhou's voice was low, almost trembling. Find her. Find who, sir? The woman who was here when I woke. I want every staff list from that night, every hospital record. I want her name. Across the city, Su Ruolan pressed a hand against her stomach and stared at the pregnancy report in disbelief. 2 heartbeats. The doctor smiled gently. Congratulations, Miss Su. You're expecting twins. Her mind swam. Twins. She should have felt joy, awe, maybe even fear, but what she felt was numbness. Because the moment she'd walked out of that hospital weeks ago, she had become invisible again. She'd taken the envelope of money and disappeared into the alleys of the city, buying her mother's medication and paying off the hospital debt in silence. She hadn't told a soul what she'd done. She hadn't dared. Now she sat in a small rented room above a laundry shop, hands shaking as she traced the lines of the ultrasound photo. 2 tiny shadows, 2 fragile miracles born from one night of desperation. I'll raise you alone, she thought. I'll protect you, even if it kills me. But fate was not finished with her yet. 3 nights later, Ruolan returned to the Su mansion to collect her final wages. Her mother's condition had worsened, and she needed the money for surgery. Su Enki greeted her at the door with an expression too sweet to be sincere. Ah, Ruolan, perfect timing. I was just going through the accounts. She opened a small jewelry box and held it out. Inside, the family's heirloom necklace, an intricate gold phoenix, was missing. Enki's voice turned sharp. It's strange. You were the last one in Mother's room. Ruolan's heart lurched. Miss Su, I've never. Before she could finish, guards entered. Search her. Hands dragged through her pockets, her bag, her apron, and from the torn lining, the missing necklace clattered to the floor. Ruolan's eyes went wide. No, that's not mine. Someone planted it. Enki's smile was cold, gleaming like glass. How disappointing. You saved your mother's life only to lose your own freedom. And that was how they found her the next morning. On the cold marble floor, wrists bound, as police lights painted her world blue and red. In court, her pleas meant nothing. She was a maid, a nobody, a girl with no proof, no power, no voice. 3 years, the judge pronounced, his gavel striking like thunder, for theft and obstruction of justice. Her mother wept outside the courtroom, her thin body shaking, but even her cries were drowned out by the whispers of scandal. The Su family cut her off completely. No one spoke her name again. Inside the gray walls of the women's prison, Ruolan counted her days not by sunlight, but by the beating of her heart and the lives growing inside her. Every night, she whispered to her unborn children, her voice raw and soft. You're my only light. Don't give up on me. Please hold on. And somehow they did. Back in the city, Mu Chengzhou's search grew obsessive. His recovery had turned him into a mystery, even to himself. Doctors insisted on rest, but he barely slept. He would wake drenched in sweat, haunted by dreams of a woman's hand reaching toward him, the faint citrus in the air, the warmth of her breath. He had narrowed down the list to 6 hospital employees, 5 nurses, and 1 janitor. None matched. The files showed no visitor, no record, no trace of the mysterious Su girl who had stood beside his bed that night. His grandmother, the formidable matriarch of the Mu family, shook her head. You were dead to the world for 4 years, Chengzhou. Be grateful you're alive. Stop chasing ghosts. But he couldn't stop. Not when every heartbeat whispered her name, though he didn't know it yet. Months passed. Behind bars, Ruolan gave birth on a stormy night, her screams drowned by thunder. The guards barely helped. The doctor was late. Where her first baby's cry split the air, relief flooded her chest, only to twist into terror moments later when silence followed. The second baby wasn't breathing. No, no, please, she begged, clutching the tiny bundle as guards pried it away. Stillborn, one of them muttered coldly. Her world shattered. She woke hours later to find her arms empty, her body weak, her cell filled with darkness. Somewhere far away, she heard a newborn's wail, but it wasn't hers anymore. In another hospital, under the glow of a chandelier, Mu Chengzhou stood beside a crib. The family doctor smiled nervously. A miracle, sir. The baby boy's vitals are strong. Chengzhou stared down at the child, small, pale, but alive. Something about him tugged at the edges of his heart. A faint scent hung in the air, like citrus blossoms carried on a breeze. He frowned, unsettled by the sudden ache in his chest. He had no idea that the same scent had once filled a prison cell on the other side of the city. He had no idea that somewhere in that darkness, the woman who had saved his life was weeping over the empty space where her child should have been. The prison gates opened with a groan, and Su Ruolan stepped out into the gray morning like a shadow set free. The sky was the color of ash. Rain clung to her lashes, mixing with the tears she refused to shed. 3 years. 3 years of concrete walls, iron doors, and the constant whisper of guilt in her ears. She had entered that place carrying life inside her. She left it with empty arms. They told her one of her twins had died the night she gave birth. The other, they said, had been sent to an orphanage. No records, no trace. She'd screamed, begged, clawed at the cold floors until her throat bled, but no one listened to a maid branded a thief. Now, standing on the edge of freedom, she felt nothing but the hollow ache of a mother whose lullabies had never been heard. Her mother was gone. The small apartment she once rented had been sold off to pay debts. There was nowhere to return to, only the city itself, glittering with life that no longer had space for her. Ruolan found work wherever she could, cleaning, laundry, nursing. Each coin she earned went into the same worn envelope, the one labeled Fine Xiaobao. Every night, she whispered her child's name into the wind. If you're alive, just let me find you. And then, one afternoon, she overheard it. 2 nurses gossiping at the back of a clinic, their voices low but clear enough to pierce through the static of the world. The Mu family's young heir is 3 this year. Fragile little thing, but oh, so handsome. They say he's got a tiny mole on his wrist, same spot as his father's. Funny, isn't it? The kid looks nothing like his mother. He barely lets her hold him. Ruolan froze, her blood turning to ice. A mole on the left wrist. Her heart began to pound so hard she thought it would break her ribs. That same mole had marked her son when she held him for the first and only time. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities she dared not voice. Could it be him? Could her child, the one declared dead, be living under the same roof as the man she had once saved? It sounded impossible, suicidal even. But the next morning, Ruolan walked to the city's grandest estate, the Mu Mansion, and applied for a position as a postpartum nanny. She used a new name, Joan, a forged ID, a borrowed story. The woman who interviewed her barely looked up from the paperwork. The pay is high, but the last 3 nannies didn't last a month. Madame Mu has a difficult temper. I can endure it, Ruolan said quietly. The woman's gaze flicked over her worn clothes, her steady eyes. She nodded. Report to duty tomorrow. Room 3B. You'll be caring for the young master. When Ruolan stepped into the Mu Mansion, it was like walking into the heart of her nightmares. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, air so clean it almost hurt to breathe, and memories sharp as broken glass hidden in every corner. She kept her head low, hands folded, eyes careful. But when the butler led her to the nursery, her breath caught. Through the glass door, she saw him. A small boy sat on the floor, clutching a stuffed rabbit. His dark eyes were wet with tears, his tiny chest heaving. Nurses hovered around him, whispering apologies, offering toys, but he wouldn't stop crying. Then he looked up, straight at her. The world stopped. Ruolan stepped closer, one hand pressed her heart. Her pulse raced, wild and unsteady. He was pale, delicate, his hair soft as ink. But it was the mole, that tiny birthmark on his wrist, that made her knees weaken. It was him, her son. When she entered the room, one of the maids tried to stop her. Wait, he doesn't like strangers. But the moment Ruolan knelt beside the boy, the crying ceased. The air itself seemed to hush. His wide eyes blinked up at her. A single hiccup left his lips, and then, softly, he reached for her sleeve. She froze, afraid to breathe. Why does he stop crying when she holds him? Someone whispered. It's strange. He never smiles until she comes near. Ruolan gathered him gently into her arms. His body was warm, his heartbeat a trembling echo of her own. The scent of milk and powder filled her nose, so achingly familiar it hurt. The boy let out a sigh, tiny hands clutching her blouse. Within minutes, he was asleep. She could feel the weight of eyes watching her. Maids, the butler, the mansion shadows, but for that moment, nothing mattered. 3 years of pain, loss, and silence melted into a single truth. Her son was alive. That night, Ruolan sat on the narrow cot in her servants' quarters, staring at the sleeping child on the monitor. Every room in the Mu mansion had cameras. Every move was recorded. She couldn't cry. Not here. Not where walls had ears. Instead, she pressed a trembling hand over her chest and whispered to herself, "You're alive. My baby's alive." Her mind replayed the fragments of her past. How Su Enki's men had taken the newborn away before she could hold him. How the prison doctor had mumbled stillborn without meeting her eyes. They had lied. They had taken him. And now, fate had led her straight back into the lion's den. The next morning, she began her duties quietly. Feeding, changing, soothing. Every touch was both comfort and torture. The boy, Mu Chengzhou, as the staff called him, grew attached to her almost instantly. He followed her with his eyes, laughed only when she spoke, and refused to eat unless she fed him. Rumors spread fast among the servants. The young master never let anyone near him before. Maybe she's some kind of miracle worker. But Ruolan didn't smile at their words. Inside, she was terrified. If the Mu family discovered her identity, she would lose him again, and this time, they would make sure she disappeared forever. One evening, as she bathed the child, a shadow appeared at the door. Tall, broad-shouldered, voice smooth but cold. "You're the new nanny?" Ruolan's hands froze mid-motion. She turned slowly. Mu Chengzhou stood there, alive, radiant, and far more formidable than she remembered. The faint scar on his wrist glinted under the soft light. His eyes were dark as obsidian, sharp enough to pierce through pretense. She bowed her head. "Yes, sir." He watched her for a long moment, gaze lingering, not on her face, but on the sleeping child in her arms. "He likes you," he murmured. "Strange. He never smiles for anyone else." Ruolan's breath caught. "Children sense warmth," she said quietly. "Maybe he feels safe." For a second, his expression softened. Then he nodded and walked away, leaving her heart in chaos. When the door closed, she held her son tighter, whispering a promise she dared not speak aloud. "Mama's here now. I won't lose you again." Outside the nursery, servants murmured in awe. "That new nanny. The young master sleeps in her arms like he's known her forever." And somewhere in the vast mansion, behind another door, Mu Chengzhou sat alone, eyes closed, breathing in the faintest trace of orange peel that still lingered in the hall. He couldn't remember where he'd smelled it before. But something deep in his chest whispered that the woman who carried that scent was the key to everything he had lost, and everything he didn't yet know. The Mu Mansion had never known silence so sharp. Afternoon sunlight poured through the tall windows, gilding the marble floors in gold. Laughter drifted faintly from the nursery, a rare sound in that cold house. Su Ruolan sat on the rug, gently rocking little Xiaobao as he babbled nonsense between giggles. For the first time in years, her heart felt almost light. Almost. But peace in the Mu family never lasted long. A maid burst into the room, breathless. "Miss Zhou, Madame wants the young master in the garden for photographs. She says the CEO's returning home early." Ruolan smiled softly. "All right, Xiaobao. Let's show them your handsome face." The boy clapped his tiny hands. His laughter echoed down the corridor, bright, innocent, unknowing. The garden shimmered under the sun. Cameras flashed, servants hurried, and the Mu family's matriarch sat nearby, pearls gleaming against her throat. Everything looked perfect, until it wasn't. One second, Xiaobao was chasing butterflies across the lawn. The next, his small body went rigid, his toy dropped to the ground. Then came the sound that shattered everything. A strangled gasp. A cry. "Xiaobao!" Ruolan screamed. The child collapsed, limbs jerking violently. Foam frothed at his lips, his tiny chest convulsing. Panic erupted. Maids shrieking, the matriarch shouting for help, guards fumbling for phones. Ruolan didn't think, she moved. She scooped him in her arms, fingers flying to his pulse. Weak, uneven, poison. The signs were unmistakable. Someone screamed, "Call the doctor!" But Ruolan's voice sliced through the chaos. "There's no time." She laid the boy on the grass, ripping open his collar with trembling hands. His skin had already turned a sickly shade of blue. Her mind flashed back. Years ago, that same color, that same stillness. Mu Chengzhou lying comatose beneath cold hospital lights. The same toxin. Her heartbeat roared in her ears, but her hands stayed steady. From the pouch she always carried, she pulled out a small velvet roll, silver needles, polished and gleaming. Gasps rippled through the crowd. What is she doing? She'll kill him. But Ruolan didn't answer. Her world had narrowed to the child before her. Her child. She pressed a needle into his wrist, another along his spine, her movements swift and precise. Beads of sweat slid down her temple. She whispered under her breath, a mantra she'd learned from her late grandmother. Healer, midwife, the woman who had taught her to fight death with hands of light. Breathe, Xiaobao. Don't leave me. Please. The boy's body convulsed once more, then went frighteningly still. Ruolan's vision blurred. Her fingers trembled. She reached for one last needle, pressing it against his chest, exactly where she'd pressed her palm against Chengzhou's heart that night, 3 years ago. And then, a sound. Faint, fragile, but real. The boy gasped, his little chest rising. Ruolan exhaled shakily, tears spilling down her cheeks. The heart monitor the nurse had brought flickered, steady. Whispers spread through the garden like wildfire. She saved him. Look, his color's returning. The matriarch stumbled forward, eyes wide. What did you do to my grandson? Ruolan's voice came soft, hoarse. I saved him. Minutes later, the mansion gates slammed open. A sleek black car screeched to a stop, and Mu Chengzhou stormed out, coat billowing behind him. What happened? The servants parted like frightened birds. His eyes found Ruolan instantly. Kneeling on the grass, blood smeared on her sleeve, the child sleeping peacefully in her lap. He froze. Her hands, her composure, the silver glint of the needles, the faint scent of orange peel in the air. It hit him like lightning. He crossed the distance in 2 strides. Who allowed her to, he began, then stopped. The words caught in his throat. She looked up at him, calm, exhausted, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. For a moment, the world fell away. You, his voice broke into a whisper. You were the one who saved me that night. Ruolan's fingers went still. The crowd's murmurs faded into stunned silence. Her pulse hammered. I don't know what you mean, sir. But his gaze was unrelenting, dark and searching. The scent, the touch, the way you use the needles. No one else could have known that technique. She swallowed hard, forcing a bow. I'm only a nanny, Mr. Mu. Please, don't misunderstand. He said nothing for a long time. Then, with a flick of his hand, he dismissed the others. The garden emptied, leaving them alone with the whisper of the wind and the sleeping child between them. Chengzhou knelt, his expression unreadable. That night, I woke to the sound of someone crying, he murmured. I thought it was a dream. But it was you, wasn't it? Ruolan bit her lip until it hurt. You're mistaken. He reached forward, brushing his fingers over the boy's wrist, right where the mole glimmered faintly under sunlight. His breath caught. This mark. Ruolan snatched the child closer, trembling. Please, Mr. Mu, don't ask. Something like pain flickered through his eyes. But he didn't press. Instead, he turned his gaze to the silver needles lying in the grass. The toxin, he said quietly. It's the same one that nearly killed me. Ruolan nodded once. It's rare, expensive, not something a child could come across by accident. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Then Chengzhou stood, his jaw tightening. Someone in this house is trying to kill my son. Ruolan rose too, holding Xiaobao protectively. And you think he'll stop there? Their eyes met, 2 flames of the same fire. That evening, the mansion transformed. Security was doubled. Every servant was questioned. Every meal tasted before being served. But the poisoner left no trace. No vial. No motive. Only the quiet certainty that the danger hadn't passed. In the nursery, Ruolan sat beside Xiaobao's bed, watching the soft rise and fall of his chest. Her heart was heavy with fear. Whoever had tried to kill the boy hadn't done it by chance. They had done it because of her, because of secrets buried 3 years ago. And now Chengzhou was beginning to remember. He appeared at the doorway sometime past midnight, his face half-shadowed. "I've sent the toxicology report to the lab," he said. "They'll confirm the match to my case within hours." Ruolan didn't look at him. "Be careful, Mr. Mu. Whoever poisoned you then is still close enough to strike again." He stepped closer, voice low. "Why do you sound as if you already know?" Her hands tightened in her lap. "Because I've seen what poison does. And because the one who saved you," she met his eyes, "would never let you die twice." For a heartbeat, his mask slipped. Emotion flashed there, shock, understanding, something dangerously close to longing. Then he turned away. "Keep the boy safe," he said, "until I find out who did this." Ruolan watched him leave, her heart aching with words she couldn't say. In the quiet that followed, she held her son close and whispered to the dark, "They took you once. They won't take you again." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, ominous, distant, a promise of storms to come. Night fell hard over the Mu mansion, and with it came whispers sharper than knives. Ever since Xiaobao's poisoning, the house no longer slept peacefully. Footsteps echoed through corridors at ungodly hours. Servants traded glances, afraid to speak too loudly. Something dark was moving behind the mansion's glittering facade, something hungry, desperate, and familiar. Su Enki was back. She swept into the Mu estate like a storm wearing silk. Her mother followed behind her, smiling, venomous, as if nothing had changed. Enki's voice filled the drawing room, sweet as sugar, sharp as glass. "Chengzhou, you've let that woman get too close. A nanny saving your son? How convenient." Mu Chengzhou didn't look up from his paperwork. "She saved Xiaobao's life when no one else could. That's not convenience. That's skill." Enki's painted lips tightened. "Skill doesn't make her trustworthy. Have you asked yourself how she knew what poison was used? Or why she happened to have needles ready, as if she'd been waiting?" Her mother chimed in smoothly. "Rumors are spreading, Chengzhou. They say you're emotionally involved with this woman." He finally lifted his gaze, cold, dangerous. "Rumors die when people who spread them are silenced." The older woman flinched, but Enki didn't. Her eyes gleamed. "We'll see how long that loyalty lasts, once you know who she truly is." By morning, the rumors had turned into wildfire. Servants whispered that Miss Zhou and wasn't who she claimed to be, that she was a criminal, an ex-convict who had once worked in the Su household. Some said she'd stolen, others that she had seduced her way into the mansion. Ruolan felt the shift immediately. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Trays were dropped near her feet by accident. When she reached the nursery, the door that had always been open was locked. Her pulse raced. "Xiaobao," she called softly. The door opened, not to her son, but to Su Enki. She stood in the doorway, dressed in white lace, a smile curving her lips. "Looking for something, Zhou, or should I say, Su Ruolan?" Ruolan's blood turned to ice. Enki's tone was honeyed. "Did you think you could hide here forever? That your little disguise would fool me?" Ruolan straightened, forcing calm. "If you have something to say, Miss Su, say it." Enki leaned close, voice dripping venom. "I'm going to destroy you, just like before. Only this time, there will be no second chances." That night, Ruolan's tea tasted wrong. Bitter, metallic. She barely took a sip before a wave of dizziness washed over her. Through the haze, she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. A door creaked. Mu Chengzhou stepped into the room, his expression unreadable, eyes dark with something that looked dangerously like fury. He moved toward her, his voice low. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Ruolan tried to speak, but her vision swam. Her body felt heavy, drugged. What are you talking about?" He caught her wrist, pulling her close, the scent of her skin, the tremble in his jaw. The reports say Xiaobao isn't my son. They say you forged everything, that you poisoned me to cover your lies. The words stabbed through her like knives. That's not true, but the air between them was thick with tension, and her limbs refused to obey her. A flicker of confusion crossed his face as she swayed in his grasp. "You're burning up," he muttered. "What did you?" Then realization hit him. The empty teacup on the table. The faint scent of something sweet mixed with bitterness. He turned sharply toward the door. "Who brought this tea?" But before he could call out, Enki appeared in the doorway. Feigned shock painted across her perfect face. "Oh my," she gasped theatrically. "Mr. Mu, what are you doing to the nanny?" Her voice carried down the hall. Cameras flashed from somewhere. Servants, guards, all drawn by the commotion. To the untrained eye, it looked exactly like what she wanted. The CEO holding his trembling maid in a scandalous embrace. Ruolan shoved herself away, eyes blazing. "You planned this." Enki's smile barely twitched. "Proof speaks louder than words, dear." By dawn, tabloids screamed headlines. Mu Group scandal. CEO's affair with nanny exposed. Former criminal linked to poisoning case. Chengzhou's board demanded explanations. His family seethed with humiliation. And in the middle of it all, Ruolan stood silent, branded once again as the villain in a story she didn't write. But this time, she wouldn't run. The next night, she broke into the study, quiet, methodical. She'd learned to move like a ghost in this mansion. She searched drawers, safes, files, until her hand landed on an envelope sealed with red wax. Inside, a DNA report. Falsified. Numbers edited. Dates altered. The child listed as not biologically related to Mu Chengzhou. But on the last page, hidden under a secondary signature, she found another stamp. The clinic logo, the same one Su Enki's mother owned shares in. Her breath caught. She pulled out another sheet, a toxicology report from years ago. The same poison, the same supplier, purchased under Enki's family company. Pieces fell together like shards of glass, forming a mirror. It was Enki all along. She had poisoned Chengzhou years ago to stop the engagement from being canceled, framing Ruolan when the plan went wrong. And now, she was doing it again. By morning, Ruolan was ready. She walked into the dining hall as calm as a storm before breaking. Every eye turned toward her. Chengzhou, Enki, the matriarch. Ruolan placed a folder on the table. "Before you judge me again," she said softly, "you should see the truth." Chengzhou frowned. "Ruolan." Enki scoffed. "More lies." Ruolan flipped the first page. "This is the real DNA report. Your fiancé switched it. Your son is yours, Mr. Mu. And this," she slid another document forward, "is proof that the poison that nearly killed you was purchased under her family's name." Silence. Enki's face drained of color. "You forged that." Ruolan's gaze sharpened. "Then perhaps we should call the police and let them decide." The matriarch rose slowly, voice trembling with fury. "Enough lies, Enki. My grandson almost died. My son nearly followed him. Do you think we wouldn't uncover the truth eventually?" Enki backed away, her perfect composure cracking. "You'll regret this, Ruolan." Ruolan met her eyes, voice low but steady. "I already have. Every day since the first time you ruined my life." The confrontation ended with guards escorting Enki and her mother out. The mansion exhaled, heavy, exhausted. When the door shut behind them, Chengzhou turned to Ruolan. His voice was quiet. "You could have run again, but you stayed." Ruolan looked down at her hands, still trembling. "I ran before. It didn't save me. This time, I wanted to save someone else." He took a step closer, his gaze softening. "You did more than that. You saved the truth." For a moment, silence held them, raw, fragile, almost tender. But beneath that calm, both knew the battle wasn't over. Some wars end when enemies fall. Others begin the moment truth finally sees daylight. And somewhere deep in the mansion's walls, hidden eyes were still watching, waiting to strike again. The night the truth surfaced, the sky bled red. It was supposed to be quiet. The storm had just broken, and thunder still rolled across the horizon like an aftershock. Yet inside the Mu mansion, silence was heavier than sound. Su Ruolan stood in the study, trembling, her fingers clutched around a crumpled medical file she wasn't meant to find. She had gone there to fetch medicine for Xiao Bao. What she discovered instead stole her breath away. 2 names, 2 infants, same birth date, same mother. The file said one word that shouldn't exist: transferred. Her heart stuttered. Transferred, not deceased. Her knees weakened. The room spun. She pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from screaming. Her other child, her other baby, had never died. The door burst open. Mu Chengzhou's voice was sharp, concerned. "Ruolan, what's wrong?" She turned slowly, eyes wide with disbelief and fury. "They lied to me," she whispered. "They told me one twin was stillborn, but he wasn't. He was taken." Chengzhou froze. "What are you saying?" Ruolan threw the file onto his desk. "I'm saying you've had another son. All this time your family, kept him from me." He stared down at the paper, the words blurring as if refusing to be real. Then he saw it, the hospital seal, the signatures of doctors loyal to the Mu family, the falsified death certificate. His chest constricted. "No. Look at the file, Chengzhou." Ruolan's voice broke. "They hid one of my babies to bury the scandal, to make sure no one questioned why a maid gave birth to your child." Her words cracked through the air like lightning. Chengzhou's hands shook as he gripped the desk, the realization sinking in like poison. "All these years," he muttered, voice hoarse. "All this time I thought Xiao Bao was my only child." Ruolan's tears fell silently. "They took my son, our son, and they made me live like he never existed." The weight of it crushed them both. By dawn, the storm outside had turned into chaos within. Chengzhou called in every contact, every security detail, every record. Files that had been buried deep in the company's private archives resurfaced one by one. And then came the final confirmation: a hidden medical facility under a false name, funded by the Mu family's second branch. A child registered under temporary custody. The record was 3 years old. A boy named Mu Chen. Ruolan's breath hitched when she saw his photograph. Dark eyes, quiet expression, a small scar above his eyebrow. "He looks just like Xiao Bao," she whispered. Chengzhou's jaw hardened. They raised him like an orphan in his own bloodline. He looked at her, something wild burning behind his calm. "We're getting him back." The confrontation came that evening. The Mu family villa stood at the edge of the estate, half forgotten and swallowed by shadows. It was where the second branch of the family, Chengzhou's uncle, aunt, and cousin, had lived quietly after the poisoning scandal years ago. Now it would become their battlefield. Ruolan and Chengzhou arrived unannounced. Guard tried to stop them, but Chengzhou's voice cut through like a blade. "Stand down, or deal with me personally." Inside, the air reeked of old perfume and smoke. His uncle sat in a velvet chair, his aunt by his side, elegant, composed, and utterly unrepentant. Between them stood a woman Ruolan recognized instantly, Su Enki's mother. Ruolan's hands curled into fists. It was you who took my baby." The woman's smile was ice. "Don't flatter yourself. We took what was necessary to keep this family from falling apart. A scandal like yours would have destroyed everything." "Destroyed your reputation, you mean?" Chengzhou snapped. "You poisoned me, lied to me, and then tore a mother from her child. You buried a life to save your pride." His uncle sighed, as if bored. "You wouldn't have woken from that coma without her, but we made sure her mistake didn't stain our bloodline. Be grateful we raised the boy at all." Ruolan trembled, voice low but fierce. "You call theft a favor?" Her aunt leaned forward, eyes glinting. "He's grown strong under our care. What can a convict offer him now?" The room seemed to tilt. Rage burned through Ruolan's chest. "A mother's love," she spat. "Something you could never buy or fake." Then came the sound. A soft cry, faint, muffled from the adjoining room. Ruolan's heart leapt. She ran before anyone could stop her, pushing open the door. There, under dim light, stood a small boy holding a wooden toy. His eyes widened when he saw her. The same dark brown as Xiao Bao's, the same unsure blink. "Yu Chen," she whispered. The boy took a step back, clutching the toy tighter. Who are you? Ruolan knelt, tears blurring her vision. I'm your mother. Before she could reach him, footsteps thundered behind her. Chengzhou appeared, but so did his uncle, his hand gripping a gun. Enough, the old man barked. No one leaves this house until this is settled. Chaos erupted. Guards lunged. Someone knocked over a lamp. Flames caught the edge of a curtain, devouring silk in seconds. The smell of smoke filled the air. Ruolan grabbed the boy, shielding him as sparks flew. Chengzhou turned, disarming one of the guards with brutal precision. His uncle shouted, "You think you could destroy the family for a woman like her?" Chengzhou's eyes were dark with fury. She's not a woman like her. She's the one who saved my life, and the mother of my children. The fire roared higher. Glass shattered. In the chaos, Enki's mother tried to flee, but Ruolan caught her wrist, wrenching the small vial from her hand. A familiar scent hit her nostrils, bitter almond. The same poison. You were going to finish what you started, Ruolan hissed. The woman sneered. You should have stayed dead. Ruolan's grip tightened. If I die tonight, she whispered, voice steady. At least I die protecting what's mine. She threw the vial into the fire. It exploded in a burst of blue flame, sending heat ripping through the room. Chengzhou pulled them both out just as the roof began to cave. Smoke clawed at their lungs. He wrapped one arm around her, the other around the boys, their boys. Behind them, the villa burned, the empire of lies collapsing in a storm of poison, fire, and blood. By dawn, the police had arrived. The culprits were taken away in handcuffs, pale, defeated, their dynasty of secrets reduced to ash. Ruolan sat on the hospital steps, both boys asleep in her arms. The twins, whole, safe, finally home. Chengzhou stood beside her, his face streaked with soot, his eyes filled with a quiet awe. He knelt beside her, voice breaking. I didn't know. Ruolan, I swear I didn't know. She looked at him, weary but unyielding. You weren't meant to. They built their lies to keep you blind. He brushed a hand across her cheek, thumb tracing a line of soot away. Then let the truth blind the rest of them. The sun rose over the smoking ruins of the villa, its light spilling across the bruised sky. Ruolan closed her eyes, holding her children close, one heartbeat under each palm. The past had taken everything from her, but had given her this moment, raw, defiant, and whole. And for the first time in years, she let herself breathe. Because truth had a price, and love had finally paid it. The city woke to the sound of truth. Newspapers hit the stands before sunrise, their front pages blazing with headlines that shimmered like justice long overdue. The maid who healed the CEO, truth behind the Mu family scandal. From servant to savior, the woman who brought down a dynasty of lies. For months, the name Su Ruolan had been whispered through corridors, printed on screens, etched into every conversation from boardrooms to coffee shops. The world that once mocked her now bowed its head in awe. The Mu Mansion, once a house of power and secrets, felt different now. The air was lighter, the silence peaceful. The marble floors no longer echoed with suspicion, but with the soft footsteps of children's laughter. In the courtyard, twin boys chased each other around the koi pond, their giggles rising above the sound of rustling bamboo. Ruolan stood at the window, watching them, her heart full, her scars still aching, but her soul finally free. The sunlight poured over her like a benediction, glinting against the thin silver bracelet on her wrist, the only piece she'd carried through prison, poverty, and betrayal. It had once been a shackle of memory. Now it was a symbol of survival. She heard footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate, familiar. Ruolan. Mu Chengzhou's voice had changed. Gone was the chill of command, the sharpness of authority. This was a man stripped bare, his arrogance burned away by truth, his pride tempered into something gentler. She turned, meeting his gaze. He looked nothing like the untouchable CEO she'd once feared. His suit was plain, his sleeves rolled up, the faint shadow of exhaustion under his eyes. But when he smiled, it reached the places she'd once thought frozen forever. You should be resting, she said quietly. He chuckled softly. So should you. You've done enough saving for a lifetime. They walked together through the garden. The air smelled of wet earth and blooming citrus. The same orange blossoms Ruolan had planted months ago, unaware that their scent would one day fill this home like a promise. The reporters had left, the cameras had gone, but the city hadn't stopped talking. It was all true. The poisons, the forged reports, the betrayal. The world knew that the maid who once disappeared into prison had been the one to save the heir's life, his child's, and his soul. But for Ruolan, vindication didn't feel like triumph. It felt quiet, heavy, necessary. They stopped by the koi pond. The twins splashed nearby, their reflections rippling in the water like fragments of light. Chengzhou knelt, gathering both boys into his arms, laughter softening his features. He looked up at her, eyes full of unspoken words. "You know," he began, voice low, "I used to think power meant control. That if I could command everything, nothing could break me." He glanced at the children, then at her. "But the truth is, I didn't really live until I lost everything and found you again." Ruolan's breath caught. He rose slowly, standing before her. His expression was steady, solemn. "Su Ruolan," he said, voice trembling just enough to betray his heart. "You didn't just heal me. You healed my family. You turned this house of ghosts into a home." He knelt, not as a CEO, not as a man begging for forgiveness, but as someone who finally understood the weight of love. The gesture was quiet, no grand declarations, no promises written in gold, just a man on his knees before the woman who had rebuilt his world with her bare hands. "Stand up, Chengzhou," she whispered, tears threatening. "You don't owe me that." He smiled faintly. "I owe you everything." She reached out, lifting him to his feet. "Then don't kneel. Just keep walking beside me." And he did. Later that evening, as dusk settled over the estate, the family gathered by the garden lanterns. The matriarch, frail but proud, took Ruolan's hand. "My grandson's mother," the old woman said softly. "I once saw you as a servant, but it was I who served lies while you served love. Forgive me." Ruolan bowed her head. "The past doesn't need forgiveness," she replied gently. "It only needs peace." The old woman nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Then you've given us both." When night fell, Ruolan walked alone through the garden. The orange blossoms swayed in the breeze, filling the air with that familiar scent, warm, sharp, alive. The same scent that had woken a man from death. The same scent that had carried her through every trial. The same scent that now wrapped her children's laughter in gold. She closed her eyes, remembering the girl she once was, the maid kneeling beside a comatose man, trembling and terrified, with no one to believe in her but hope itself. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman forged by pain, tempered by love, and crowned not by wealth, but by the quiet, unshakable power of survival. The wind shifted. Behind her, Chengzhou's voice broke the silence. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked softly. Ruolan turned, smiling faintly. "Every time I smell orange peel." He stepped closer, the lantern light painting gold across his face. "It was fate, wasn't it?" She shook her head. "No, it was choice. Fate gave us the storm, but we chose to survive it." He reached for her hand, fingers intertwining with hers. "Then let's keep choosing each other." For a moment, the world went still. No ghosts, no poison, no lies. Only the scent of blossoms, the hum of distant laughter, and two people who had lost everything, only to find that what remained was enough. The next morning, a magazine article went viral. The maid who healed the CEO and rewrote his destiny. Once framed, now revered. Once silenced, now celebrated. Su Ruolan's courage changed more than one life. It changed what love means when stripped of status and pride. Ruolan didn't read it. She didn't need to. Her truth wasn't written in ink. It was written in the small hands that clutched hers, in the home that finally breathed peace, in a man who had learned how to kneel not from shame, but from love. That night, she tucked the twins into bed. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of citrus through the open window. She smiled. "Rest, my loves," she whispered. "The storm's over." And somewhere deep in her heart, the world whispered back, soft, certain, and eternal. You healed him. You healed them all. Thank you for watching this story to the end. Please click on subscribe, like, and share this video. Click on the screen to watch the next one.